so much for joining us. We are very excited to be able to talk to you this morning, just to dive a little bit into dementia and Alzheimer's, kind of what current research is telling us about the disease. Look at some statistics, ways that you can act now to hopefully prevent or lessen the risk of you potentially developing Alzheimer's later on, or if you know someone that already has dementia and Alzheimer's, things that you can do as a caregiver to really help in your interactions with someone. And then I'm very excited to have with us Cecil Davis, who is the Director of Clinical Services for Southern Pharmacy. Southern Pharmacy is just one of our favorite partners here in the Aldersgate community. I tell their president and owner that if you could replicate their customer service for every partner that we have, it would be a dream world. So everybody that we interact with at Southern Pharmacy is awesome. Southern Pharmacy provides our medications for our residents in our healthcare areas. So for those folks that are residing at Parker Terrace Assisted Living or Cuthbertson Village Assisted Living and Asbury, which is our skilled nursing building, Southern Pharmacy provides medications for those residents. And they're just an awesome resource for questions. They've been super helpful for us as we have really journeyed through COVID and helping us with the vaccinations and then different treatment modalities that came out. And they just really help us to stay educated, or if we're thinking about doing something, just a great partnership. So Cecil, welcome, and thank you for being with us here today. Do you want to tell folks just a little bit about yourself, and then I'll go back and kind of introduce myself?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, we enjoy being a partner with y'all, and it's, I think it's been a great relationship. So thank you for letting us be there. We appreciate it. So I'm Cecil Davis. I'm the Director of Clinical Services for Southern Pharmacy. We're a part of Guardian Pharmacy nationally out of Atlanta, but locally we have 3 pharmacies, one in Kernersville, North Carolina, one in Pink Hill, and one in Wytheville, Virginia. And we service about 4 states out of those 3 pharmacies, primarily long-term care, continuing care campuses, but we do any type of long-term care from hospice and PACE programs, your typical assisted livings, and your more traditional nursing homes, all the way up to the continuing care retirement communities. So my responsibility is primarily over the external teams. So the consultant pharmacists, consultant nurses work with me. And so they're in the buildings doing consulting each month. They're on the campuses doing consulting each month, which just means they're there looking at people's medication regimens, make sure they're optimized, make sure there's no issues with that. And then I also do our quality assurance program for the pharmacy. So if there is an issue, it comes through me for me to review. And then I do things like this, where we just do educational programming. So thank you so much for letting us be here today.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cecil. And just to back up, I am Brooke Hodge, and as of 2 weeks ago, I am the Executive Director here at Aldersgate. Prior to that, I have been here for almost 10 years in the Aldersgate community, serving in various capacities. My background is nursing, but I have also been a nursing home administrator and assisted living administrator for the last several years. So I always can put on a clinical hat when needed, and I love being able to provide input when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's, because I can give that clinical perspective of best practices, but also not just focusing on the clinical piece of the disease. What does the social aspects look like, and financial aspects, and what are ways that you can help someone with that journey progress through the disease and living their best possible day. So that is, something that I'm very passionate about and love being able to provide, input through podcasts and, consultations with folks. So we're going to really just dive right in. What today is going to look like is I'm going to just walk through what is dementia, what is Alzheimer's, what numbers look like currently, what are numbers likely going to look like as we project out for the next 10, 15, 20 years, and what do we need to be doing now, knowing that this disease it's not going away. In fact, our numbers are only going to get higher and higher for folks in America and globally over the next 20, 30 years. And so what are things that you can do today to potentially lessen the likelihood that you develop the disease? And then Cecil is going to talk about a new medication that is out there, which is really new, and just to help educate folks on what that drug is, how it works, and how its use is for people that have dementia and Alzheimer's. So just kind of taking a step back about what is dementia, what is Alzheimer's. And people typically utilize those terms interchangeably when they're discussing things. And, that is, it's okay that people do that, but I'm here to educate, what are the differences in those two diseases? And so dementia is really just a term that we use to describe a group of symptoms that are associated with a decline in memory, a decline in judgment, a decline in thinking, or a decline in reasoning. And so we typically use that term, just to describe, generally what dementia is. And so how that differs from Alzheimer's disease is that people typically say, oh, so-and-so has Alzheimer's or so-and-so has dementia, and use those terms interchangeably. However, dementia is the term that we use. It's really like the umbrella term. It's like the overarching, term that we use. Kind of like if you were to say that you've got shapes, and so shapes would be the overarching term, and then you've got circles, triangles, rectangles. So dementia is really that kind of overarching term that we use for a group of symptoms that, that result in a decline in memory and thinking and reasoning. Alzheimer's is one form of dementia. Now, the reason people typically use those terms interchangeably is because Alzheimer's disease is, in fact, the most common form of dementia. And so it accounts for anywhere between 60 and 75% of all dementia cases. And so people would be right 75% of the time, likely, if they were to say somebody with dementia has Alzheimer's disease, just because it is the most common form of dementia. Now, there are other forms of dementia that are out there. There is vascular dementia, and that typically is a form of dementia that presents itself after someone may have had a stroke, and maybe the stroke not only resulted in, physical disabilities for someone, but also may affect that part of the brain that is, responsible for that memory, thinking, or reasoning. We have alcohol-related dementia, where somebody may have, been an alcoholic for years, and it has affected the brain through lack of nutrition. And so lots of different forms of dementia that are out there. We could do a whole podcast just delving into all the different types. But really, Alzheimer's is the one that tends to get most of the focus when it comes to dementia, just because it is the most common form. So that helps you to understand kind of what the difference is in the two terms. Dementia is the overarching, term, whereas Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. one thing to keep in mind when talking about dementia and Alzheimer's is that it's not a normal part of aging. So just because you may have a life expectancy and live to be, 85, 90, 95 years old, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go on to develop dementia. With that being said, however, it is a disease that typically develops after the age of 65. You may be thinking, well, wait a minute, I've heard, I saw an NBC News special where someone was, 38 years old, or they were 45 and they developed, dementia. And that is really few and far between of cases. It is most likely to affect someone after the age of 65. Now, one of the things, though, to keep in mind is while it's not a normal part of aging, your risk does increase for developing dementia as you get older. So the likelihood of you developing dementia or Alzheimer's before the age of 65 is really, it's minimal. But after you hit the age of 65, your risk does start to double every 5 years. So every 5 years, your risk would double after the age of 65. After you reach the age of 85, the risk reaches about 1/3 of those folks over the age of 85 actually will have Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. So that is the one thing that scientists will agree on when asking, what are risk factors? Will I develop dementia when I get older? And really, the answer that most scientists will tell you is, we can't tell you definitively if you will or not. We do know, though, that your risk does increase the older that you get. Now, with that being said, are there other things that come into play to either increase your risk or lessen the likelihood of your risk? And so while we can't change aging, aging is just something that's going to happen, and we can buy into everything on the market to help slow down aging, but it is going to happen whether you want it to or not. And that is a risk factor that you can't control. Another piece of that you can't control is obviously your genes. You were born with half of the DNA that came from your mother and half of the DNA that came from your father. And so there are certain genetic things that scientists have looked at, certain gene markers that if you have those, could potentially increase the risk of you later developing dementia or Alzheimer's. So with that, you also can't change your genes. As hard as you may try that, that is that genetic blueprint that is within you. So knowing that we can't change aging or our genes, what are some of the things that we can do? And so scientists and researchers have done a lot to delve into what it is that we can do to prevent these diseases. And there's so much attention that is put into dementia just because of just the numbers that we see. It is currently the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. We have over 5.7 million Americans that are living with Alzheimer's disease. That doesn't take into account the other forms of dementia that folks are living with. And by 2050, so we're looking at, less than 30 years away. That 5.7 million number is likely to increase to 14 million. So we can see over the course of really 30 years, those numbers are going to triple. And the reason for that is kind of two factors. One is that with the advances in medical technology and just advances in science, people are living longer now. If you were to look at average life expectancies back in the 1800s, if somebody made it to, 40 years old, they were, said to have lived, a very long life. Well, you fast forward, 100 years later, more than 100 years later, and you can see what the average life expectancy is now. And it's, I've not looked at the latest statistics, and I know sadly with COVID, that's actually decreased life expectancy, which is just mind-boggling to me that a pandemic that's been affecting us for a year and a half would actually lower life expectancy, but it has. But it's typically around, that anywhere from 78 to 80 years old, depending, male versus female. And so people are living longer. And so, like I said earlier, the fact that we're living longer, we're making it past age 65 now, you're gonna just by just the natural cause of people living longer are going to see more cases of Alzheimer's and dementia just because people are living longer. The second reason is that we're going to see so many more cases of dementia and Alzheimer's is because we're baby boomers. And so after World War II, when soldiers came back home and we saw a huge boost in the number of births between that kind of 20-year time frame after World War II ended to really, the early 60s. And so our baby boomers now are starting to reach their 60s and their 70s. And so again, a large number of people at one time are hitting these age demographics. And so we are going to see just again, that many people hitting those ages that you're going to see more cases of dementia and Alzheimer's because of just aging. And so this is a problem that is not going away. The financial cost of Alzheimer's and caring for someone with Alzheimer's is, in the billions and billions. Lots of unpaid caregivers that are out there. It could be spouses, it could be children. Alzheimer's affects across all races and ethnicities. There's not a huge difference if you look at whites versus Latinx versus blacks, that there's not a huge difference in the percentages that you see across, races. Now, when you start diving into socioeconomic status, you do start to see discrepancies there. And so, and that goes into a lot of times it ties into access to healthcare, which I will go into in just a second when you look at ways to be able to prevent the disease process. So all in all, it's a disease that's not going away. In fact, statistics are only going to get worse. And so with in the vein of not having it be, this daunting cloud, which it is, hanging over us, looking at the proactive things that you can do to help lessen your likelihood. And so, Diana, if you want to switch to the next slide, and maybe the next one. And let's see. So this is a really good, quote that, while it may not be possible to control the disease, we can control how we live. So we can't control aging, we can't control our genes, but we can control how we live. Can we get the next slide, Diana? Next one. Okay, and so if we look at things that we can do to prevent the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's disease, scientists really look at, looking at diet and exercise are two huge pieces of the puzzle. I'm going to advance to the next slide, Diana. And so looking at diet, so what's good for the heart is good for the brain. And what that statement really means is that scientists and researchers have really looked at how diet and cardiovascular disease really play into dementia and Alzheimer's. And so for years, and this has gone for really since like the 30s, we have known that when someone dies with Alzheimer's disease, and the only way we 100% know that it was Alzheimer's is to do an autopsy of the brain. And so when we look at brains on a microscopic level of someone who has had Alzheimer's disease, we know, and this is not new, that we see plaques and tangles. Those are like protein kind of conglomerations that have built up in the brain of somebody with dementia and Alzheimer's. We know that. We've known that for years, that is to be expected if someone has had Alzheimer's disease. something very interesting that was discovered not too long ago, and lots of attention has been put into this in the state of North Carolina. Wake Forest, the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, those are, really awesome schools that put a lot of attention into Alzheimer's and dementia research. And so for years, we've known plaques and tangles were there. Well, something interesting that we found years ago was they took the brain of somebody who died of just natural causes of aging. They had no signs or symptoms of Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, and they did an autopsy of that brain. And shockingly, they found plaques and tangles in that brain as well. So it really made researchers go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we thought plaques and tangles were the explanation of what's going on in the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's disease. But lo and behold, we're seeing it in normal brains too. So there's got to be something more there that is explaining why someone would develop Alzheimer's versus not. So we know they both have plaques and tangles in their brains. What is the explanation of what's going on in the Alzheimer's brain and didn't happen in I'll say the normal brain. And so when they started looking closer at the microscopic level, what they found was that the brain with Alzheimer's had what are called microinfarcts, so little tiny brain bleeds that were from years and years of uncontrolled hypertension, high blood pressure. And so scientists really started looking at the relationship between cardiovascular disease health and Alzheimer's disease. And we have since found that 80% of people that have died of Alzheimer's disease have had a cardiovascular component and issue to that. So that takes you back to what are some of those controllable things that you can do. And so diet, diets that are low in sodium, there's the DASH diet that's out there, the Mediterranean diet, which focuses on low in sodium, little red meats, heavy on, fishes. Those are, diets that, really have shown to have a positive effect on brain health. The second piece of that is that if you have cardiovascular, disease, it's really keeping that blood pressure within a normal range so that over years and years, your brain is not being subject to high blood pressure and the potential for these tiny brain bleeds to happen over time. You can see right here, sleep, lots of studies that have been done recently on, needing 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep a night. And so I'm probably not the best person to preach on getting lots of sleep because I'm someone that I think doesn't require a lot of sleep, but I will tell you, that 7 to 8 hours, it has been shown to be kind of that happy number for most people. And that allows your body just time to, really repair itself and kind of rejuvenate itself by having, that quality sleep time. So lots of studies done on sleep. Dang, get to the next one. Exercise and hobbies and socializing. Those are other things that lots of research that has gone into. Both of those is showing, the exercise, kind of what I was saying earlier, helps to lower the likelihood or help if you've already developed cardiovascular disease factors to really help get those under control, lower blood pressure and things of that nature. So exercise is, really important for brain health as well. I can't, underplay just the importance of hobbies and socializing when it comes to brain health. You've heard the saying with other muscles of your body, such as, your biceps, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so if you don't work out, your brain is just like any other part of your body, that the less you stimulate it, the less likely, it is to be at its optimal, state. So, it is really important to keep those neurons in the brain firing. So, learning new things, things. Here at Aldersgate, learning does not stop just because you hit the age of, 62 or 65. Learning is, just crucial. Our folks sometimes learn something new, every single day. We do a lot of things, learning second languages, lots of things to like really stimulate the brain. Also living in a continuing care retirement community, life plan community, it's huge just because you have that socialization if you want it. And so, you've got a group of neighbors, lots of friendships and fellowship are, developed. And that is so important to have those social connections, here. And that just really helps keep your brain functioning at an optimal level. Now, once you have, had someone, loved one, maybe yourself, where you are seeing a decline in cognition, you're maybe going into the early stages of dementia and Alzheimer's, what are those things, that you can do? Everything that I've talked about are things that you can continue to do, with the disease process. Lots of times, because this is just the American way of thinking, it is to want to have a pill that is going to solve, everything. And there are dementia and Alzheimer's medications that are out there. And so you have heard of Aricept, you've heard of Namenda, Exelon that are out there. And those medications have been out for years and they work different ways. A lot of times more effective kind of in the early stages of the disease process. But I'm going to turn it over to Cecil now, really just to talk to you guys about a new medication that's on the market that's getting a lot of attention, and just to kind of educate you guys through that. So Cecil, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Great, thank you, Brooke. So probably by now, can everybody see? Can you see my screen, Brooke? Probably by now you've heard some of this about this drug. It's pronounced Aduhelm, so it took me a little while to practice that and learn how to pronounce it. The generic for it is even. Let me go back. The generic for it's a little harder to pronounce. We'll talk about that in just a second. Let me. What are y'all seeing on my screen right now? Are you seeing the slides and the next slide up, or are you just seeing the main slide?
I am seeing the slide and the next slide up.
Okay, let me see if I can fix that. All right. Let's try again here. All right, I'm gonna try this again. How about that? You just see the big screen now? Okay. So the generic for this is called Adukanyumab. And so it's just a monoclonal antibody, but I'll talk about that as we go. This presentation today was developed by a student of mine. Her name is Jacqueline Kuntz. She's going on to her next rotation, or she would be helping with this today. So Brooks already talked about this, about the amyloid plaques and the tangles. And so this drug, Aduhelm, really works particularly on these plaques and tangles. And just like Brooke was saying, there's a lot of things that contribute to this, but this features on these two things that are defining features of Alzheimer's disease. And we'll talk about how it works on that. Our current Alzheimer's medications are limited. So just like Brooke said, you're familiar with probably the three ACE acetylcholinease inhibitors, which are donepezil, which is Aricept, Exelon, which is rivastigmine, and galantamine, which is Razodone. And then Namenda was the one that came a little bit later, memantidine, which is an NMDA antagonist, These were both used for symptomatic treatment, and they improve cognitive function and quality of life. And you saw a lot of the donepezil and the memantidine combinations pretty early when both those drugs came out. There's been good results with these drugs. If you have a loved one that's used them, or if you used them, you know there is a point where you kind of reach a maximum effect with that. But they were good drugs to have added to the Alzheimer's options, because we just didn't have a lot out there. But now we have Aduhelm, which is the first Alzheimer's drug to hit the market since 2003. So it's almost been, what, 20 years since we've had a new drug. This drug is intended to target the progression of the disease, which is different from the other drugs that we have out there. They have changed the indications for just for use in early Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, mild dementia. This drug is coming to market with a lot of controversy. The controversy is just based on whether or not it's an effective medication or not. That's one of the controversies we'll talk about. The second one is a very expensive medication. And again, it's pronounced Adukanyumab is the generic. So, and this MAB just stands for monoclonal antibody, which is a new class of drugs that's you tend to see used in cancer for the most part, but this drug they have found use in Alzheimer's. So again, Adukanyumab, that's how you pronounce it. I have to keep practicing. All right. So this works. This drug is a monoclonal antibody, Adukanyumab. It is designed to bind to those plaques that Brooke was talking about in the brain. And when it binds to it, it causes your body to identify it as a foreign invader to the body, and then your own body will attack that plaque and clear it. So the hypothesis is, going back to what Brooke said, is that if we clear these plaques, then we'll hopefully stop brain cell deterioration, or at least that avenue of it, and reduce cognitive decline. So again, all this drug is doing is binding to those plaques that are in the brain, causing your body to identify them as something that needs to be destroyed by the immune system. The immune system takes over, destroys these plaques. So it's actually just kind of triggering your body to clear these out. It is given as a intravenous medication, IV medication, every 4 weeks. So you can see a picture of the packaging here, Aduhelm, Adukanyumab. And so it'll be given over an hour. It's just like any other IV infusion that you would get. I think we will run this through a filter, which again is just it's more for your nurses than for anything else. This is the dosing. It's 1 milligram per kilogram for 4 weeks for 2 doses, then 3 milligrams per kilogram for 4 weeks times 2 doses, then 6 milligrams per kilogram every 4 weeks for 2 doses. And then you'll work up to the dose of 10 milligrams per kilogram every 4 weeks. Yeah, I think that's all on that slide. So there's 3 big side effects that we need to talk about from this medication. One is called ARIA, and that's amyloid-related imaging changes to your brain. We'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. There's headache associated with this medication and falls. But the amyloid-related imaging changes, this commonly presents as temporary swelling in the brain that resolves. Most of the cases, most of the folks that were on this medication remained on treatment after they suspended the medication. And so again, this is a finding that they'll find on MRIs. It will, potentially cause you to stop the medication until it resolves. Yeah, so the severity was mild in 30% of the patients, moderate in 58% of the patients, and severe in about 13%. It resolved after about 12 weeks in well over half, and then after 20 weeks in almost 100%. So again, the warnings and precautions are the changes on the with the brain that can occur, and then any hypersensitivity reactions that can occur. Only one patient had this during the clinical trials. So this is where some of the controversy comes in with this medication. So we're going to look at 3 studies. There was a study that was conducted in a smaller population. It was study 103. Excuse me. Then study 301 and 302 are large international studies, and we'll talk a little bit about those studies on the next slides. Study 103 was called the PRIME trial. There were 192 patients enrolled in that. It did confirm reduction of plaques in the brain. The greatest decline was seen on higher doses. And there was a long-term extension of this particular study. Study 301 is the one that I think caused the most problems during the FDA. This did not demonstrate benefit by failing to produce clinical endpoints. So the FDA claimed that the results were due to fewer patients being exposed to the high dose, which is the 10 milligrams per kilogram. And there was an imbalance in the number and distribution of patients that were rapidly progressing in Alzheimer's disease. So I know this is a lot of kind of pharmacy talk about all this, but basically the FDA felt like there were some issues with this study because the patients weren't on the target dose. But this is probably where some of the controversy comes from. Study 302 showed that there were pervasive and significant results across all endpoints. So that showed that the amyloid plaques and the tangles, they were seeing continued reductions with those on the drugs. Patients were treated with a high dose, experienced significant reductions in progression of cognitive and functional impairments. And so that was significant. So the results of this trial, 302, which is called EMERGE, provided the strongest evidence. So, I mean, I just want to take a minute and say, I understand how important this drug is to people that are living with Alzheimer's disease or have family that are living with Alzheimer's disease. So there's a lot of emotion tied around this drug also, because this is can be a devastating disease and people do want to have a treatment option for it. So this is very encouraging that we have this drug out there, but the FDA felt like there were some issues with the studies, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the FDA approval is an accelerated approval track, which is there for certain drugs. The FDA concluded that the benefits of Aduhelm outweighed the risks. But the controversy, so the FDA advisory panel voted almost unanimously in November 2020 against the approval. And then 3 members of the committee that were opposed resigned from the FDA basing some of their decisions on some of these studies. And those who spoke out at the approval criticized the broad indications, which have since been changed. So it was initially indicated for like all stages of Alzheimer's disease. It's now just indicated for the earlier stages. And there were just some inconsistencies in the studies, but it has made it to market. And so the other piece of it that we need to talk about is the cost. So this medication will enter the market at about $56,000 per year, or about $4,000 per infusion. So that's a lot. Biogen said they'll hold the price steady for the first 4 years. They think that Aduhelm, the copays for Aduhelm could be up to about $12,000 per year, about $11,500 per year. IV infusions fall under Part B. So coverage could mean higher Part B premiums, but again, that we have to just kind of wait and see on that. In addition to the cost of the medication, there's also MRIs and PET scans. And then currently, if all the beneficiaries in the system of the Medicare system, I think it would cost the Medicare system about $29 billion currently if everyone was treated. So that's a lot. That's going to be significant. I don't have any information at this point on if there will be copay assistance or if there'll be drug assistance on this. It's just too new. The other thing that we don't know about yet is if this will be listed as a specialty drug. My gut feeling is it will be a specialty drug, which means that Biogen will limit it to just certain pharmacies. So if your physician did think that you needed to go this route or a loved one needed to go this route, they would probably have to work through a specialty pharmacy. This might be given in infusion centers initially instead of in continuing care retirement communities. So a lot of these are just questions we don't know yet. So I think bottom line is it's potentially a promising drug. There's studies that show that it does decrease the plaques in the brain, which the theory is if you do that, then you'll reduce some of the issues with Alzheimer's. There's been studies that show that there's good cognitive retention while on the medication, but the tough piece is just getting it paid for. So I know there's probably a lot of questions about this medication. I will be glad to answer whatever I can. And then, Brooke, I'm always available. We can do this, as many times as y'all want to, just to kind of talk through it. As I have more information, especially on the pay piece, I'll be glad to share that. Are there any questions I can answer? And Diane, I stopped sharing my screen, so there may not be anything up right now.
Just one of the questions I have, Cecil, is are you aware of anyone just in communication with other pharmacists? Because I know probably at this time Southern would not be dispensing this drug until more information is given on whether it would be a specialty pharmacy. But have you heard of any other pharmacies that have dispensed this infusion and it being used on anybody that you're aware of at this time?
We don't currently have any residents, and I'm not aware of any residents that are currently on it at this time.
Okay. So all in all, just a very new medication that I think we will start to hear more about, over time. It's just, it's very frustrating, when you look at costs of, medications that could potentially really benefit someone, and you see, $56,000 price tag and, copays that are, could still even be in the thousands, that it's discouraging, for people that are, looking at this medication as something that could really benefit, people. I think it's similar to when, new cancer drugs come out. We feel the same way too, where you're like, man, this is something that could really benefit someone, and the costs are just astronomical.
Yeah.
So I think, more information to come. Oh, no, that's okay. I was just going to say, I guess more information to come on, how that will look for, the public and people that can benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be $1 trillion drug in the market. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's just a matter of who is able to, afford it. I'm sure Medicaid will and Medicare will cover it at some point, just because it's the. I think they'll have to cover it because it's the only drug for this disease that it potentially actually works on the progression of the disease. So usually when you have one drug in that sector, they have to cover it. So again, it may just be a question of whether the copays are affordable or not.
Yeah. I wonder too, Cecil, if you'll see other pharmaceutical companies kind of swooping in and kind of looking at similar, pharmaca, action, for the medication, and kind of coming up with similar because I think that where there'll be market opportunity is for somebody new to come in and say, we can do it for a little bit cheaper,
Right.
and
Right.
kind of how we saw, with the COVID vaccine, not so much on cost because that was a pandemic, but really, Alzheimer's is its own pandemic, but it's just, it's sad that, there's something with a price tag this high. Cecil, I wasn't in, medicine at the time of when, Aricept and Namenda came out. Was there similar, processes kind of, like this with Namenda and Aricept when they came out, or had those always kind of started off as being an affordable drug? Do you remember?
I mean, since they were by mouth medications, they were expensive, but they weren't out of reach. And the insurance plans came along and covered them pretty quickly. So, where this is going to be $56,000 a year, you're probably looking at something that just ran a few $1,000s per year. And then with copays, it made it affordable. But yes, I mean, all of those drugs, Aricept, all those were expensive, and they were criticized for being expensive when they first came out. But nowhere near what this is going to cost.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I guess kind of see if I'm summarizing this correctly. I guess, this is a medication where, because of its newness, it's going to be one of those kind of wait and see, the long-term, benefits, and seeing if cost will come down for people. And I'll be very curious to see physicians' responses to this medication, and its, how much it gets prescribed, to try to, help, lessen these numbers of, tripling over the next, 20 to 30 years, and just seeing where things go with that. I wonder if it would benefit us, almost in kind of a 6-month time frame to regroup and kind of look at how much has it been prescribed at that point. Having a conversation with our medical director as well, Dr. Gambino, just on, what his practice is kind of seeing, as well as some of the, centers in Charlotte that are Alzheimer's specific, treatment facilities, to see if where their heads are, and if they're going to jump on, and start, prescribing this medication and working through, potentially financial support at this time, or, helping people get those copays, underway.
In my understanding, this isn't like you do this for a year and you stop. Once you're on it, in order to prevent the progression.
Yeah, because I'm sure with the way this drug works with the disease, I'm sure it's similar to just if you're taking a blood pressure medicine, it's working as long as you're taking it.
Correct.
But as soon as you stop taking it, the potential for those plaques and tangles to reform are there. So it's one of those medications that's going to be, and I think too, knowing that it's it's an infusion.
Excuse me.
And you said once a month, is that correct, Cecil?
Right. Every 4 weeks, you would get an infusion.
So I also think too, it's going to be something that patients and families will also weigh into, quality of life, if they're seeing, a benefit versus having to go in, once a month. And sometimes that can be hard on people, getting people into an infusion center, and, having the MRI imaging that has to be followed, it's kind of weighing that benefit versus quality of life type discussion as well.
And that cost will not be insignificant. I mean, MRIs and PET scans are expensive scans.
And I'm sure working through the, the loopholes of getting, Medicare, Medicaid to pay for, a scan as a, condition of being, on a medication. Those are all things that will be interesting to see over time, how those types of things get covered. So, well, Cecil, as you hear of, things such as, is there going to be cost assistance or people getting prescribed this medication, and how that's playing out, please keep us, posted as well.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yep.
Any other thoughts, or Diana, any questions from you, or anything you're seeing? Questions?
No, not at the moment. Sorry.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll kind of start winding down, really the rest of today is just looking at, the different stages of, dementia, Alzheimer's that people can kind of go through, and caregiver, support along, each phase of someone's walk with dementia. And, really early on in the disease, it can be very distressing for the person, more so than the people they're interacting with, because early in the disease, there's still enough, mental capacity to know that there's something, there's something going on with them. They know that they're forgetting. They know that, their reasoning is not what it, used to be. They may make comments like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, my brain's just not what it used to be." And it can be very distressing for people to be out in social settings and things where people may question them about things that they may not be able to answer. I'm going to advance forward, Diana. One more. And so, some of the things that, these are kind of general things, if they become, challenges for people, is, sometimes changing lamps to touch lamps, really, I know that kind of fencing in the yard is also helpful, where if you may have someone that's, trying to, go outside, it kind of helps keep them define, their personal space. I know something that is really important is, with cell phones, we take for granted being able to just look somebody's phone number up, or touch their, name, and not knowing, phone numbers. But for someone with dementia, even being able to do that, they may revert back to a time when it really was, a touch tone, type phone. And so having a phone number list that has the photos of each person, so, people that they would likely really want to reach out to if they were, worried about something. So, having your kids' phone numbers, spouses, things of that nature, is really important. Lowering hot water temperatures so that if they were taking a shower and things, the potential for them to get burned would be lessened. Before Diana. We can actually pass through this one. That one's in the next one, because we've got another webinar that's coming up on finances. We go to the next slide. This just kind of goes through the different progressions of the disease, going from the beginning stages to middle to end stages, and just things that are helpful. You can go to the next slide. It's really helpful at times. I have a family member with dementia, and so a lot of times, just leaving them notes on things, having a calendar really helps, so they know, what the day is. We leave them Post-it notes that say, today is Monday, August the, 16th, we will be home around this time, and keeping, really kind of their stuff close by, so that they have, their glasses or the TV remote, cell phones, things of that nature. Less is more a lot of times with folks that have dementia, because you just don't want so much stimulation coming into the brain, because it's very overwhelming. Having multiple input is overwhelming, even when you've got all your mental facets, and it's especially distressing when they may not be able to work through that reasoning and judgment. Next slide. Really, this is a huge point. It's just, going with the flow. Correcting someone with dementia does nothing to make the situation any better for yourself or for them. A lot of times you can correct them, and they're just going to ask the same thing again. It can lead to arguments. It can lead to really a lot of discord and disharmony. So instead, you just want to validate and improvise. You're not agreeing with their maybe distorted sense of reality or their inaccuracies, but you're just being there, to support them. Correcting the facts, really only helps to erode their self-esteem. So just being, patient is huge with, as a caregiver. helping them find words or finish sentences if you know what they need to communicate. It's really also lessening choices for them, because you can, if you go out to eat with someone that may be in the middle stages of dementia, seeing a menu with, 100 different choices can be very overwhelming for them. Choice is still very important. You don't want to take away their ability to make choices, but sometimes you have to lessen those choices for them. If you give them a breakfast menu, knowing what they liked in the past. So, Mom, do you want waffles or do you want eggs? As opposed to them seeing 500 different types of omelets and pancakes and waffle combinations, and that can be very helpful for them. Recognizing too that things may change with dementia. With my family member, things that she never liked to eat are now things that she loves. So not automatically just saying, oh, no, she hates broccoli, she'll never eat that. Routines may change, where somebody may have stayed up till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Going to bed early may be very important to them. And so just knowing that preferences and things may change over time. Having music, a playlist of music that they may like. It is so interesting that no matter how far someone progresses with dementia, that piece of the brain that can remember and can recall rhythm and music will stay intact to the very end. And it is so interesting. So music can be very calming for people. It can be very helpful for them in reminiscing. So having a playlist of music can be really helpful in, helping to soothe someone, or just help them if they're having a difficult time. Okay, next one. Late stages of dementia. Go to the next slide, Diana. Go to the next one. Really, again, like I said, just really simplifying choices. A lot of times there may be a pushback to want to take care of hygiene things or to change clothes. Sometimes if you find that they're wearing the same clothes over and over, if they happen to take them off when they're going to bed, it's sometimes a good idea to try to, swipe them at that time, wash them, and then get them back before they wake up the next morning. Go to the next slide, Diana. Thank you. Go to the next one if you want to. Staying calm. A lot of times you do have to be very firm, and, show through your body language, things that are acceptable or not acceptable. Just remember that this is a time too when filters are not going to be there anymore. So, in life, from a very early age, we learn as children what's acceptable or not acceptable. And we have, our caregivers, our parents, grandparents, teachers telling us, what's acceptable and what not. And so we have that filter. We know cussing, ooh, don't say that word. We know, running around the house naked after, age 2 is not appropriate, behavior. Making racial slurs, things of that nature. We know what's acceptable and not acceptable. So we have that filter that's there. With dementia, that filter is lifted, and so you will start to see a lot of things that your parents, spouses, friends never did before. And so it's really helpful to try to redirect behaviors, staying calm, letting them know things that are inappropriate, being understanding, and just knowing that it's uncomfortable for you, but this is not who they were years ago, and just helping them to step back into what is acceptable. And a lot of times that's through firmness and just being patient.
Yeah, Brooke,
Yeah.
if it's okay, I need to hop off.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got an 11 o'clock, but thank y'all so much for letting me be here. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Cecil. And if anybody has any questions, I'll get those to you. Thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Diane, I'm just going to go to the next slide, and I think that is really, let's see, I think that's good. Really and truthfully, it's just, I could do a whole webinar podcast on, interactions and approaches for, specific, behaviors and things that folks have. And I'll be happy to do so if there is an interest in doing so. Diana, thank you so much for, time today. I hope that it's been informative on, the new medication that's out there, kind of what our numbers look like, from in the United States, globally, in regards to dementia and Alzheimer's as a disease that's not going away. I'll be really curious to see where this medication kind of the path that it takes over the next 6 months to 1 year, and getting input from local physicians on what they're seeing its use to be. If you are a caregiver out there, or someone that is living with dementia, I praise you for doing so. For caregivers or angels on earth, especially the unpaid ones, and where roles, reverse into, where you're now having to probably take care of a parent or a spouse. I commend you. Just know that communities like Aldersgate are always here to support you in that journey when you need more assistance than you may be able to provide in the home by yourself, whether it be through Aldersgate at home, whether it be moving into Cuthbertson Village and our memory support, or Asbury, our skilled nursing building. Just know that resources are out there to help you. Be kind to yourself, be patient, and make sure that you just take care of yourself through this journey. I appreciate you guys so much for joining us today. And Diana, thank you so much for having Cecil and myself today on this podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You guys have a great day. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to, feed them through. Diana and Cecil or myself will be happy to answer any questions or feedback you may have. Have a great Monday and a great week, everyone. Thank you.